Yo, welcome back to the channel. Kamusta po sa inyong lahat? So, Kuro Games has finally confirmed two characters that the community has been circling around for what feels like forever. Hiyuki is real, Denia is real, and both of them are landing right around the anniversary window. That alone already tells you these are not just random additions. These are statement characters. Hiyuki is confirmed as a Glacio sword user and Denia is confirmed as a fusion rectifier. That is the headline. No guessing, no vague hints, just a straight confirmation from the source. And if you have been paying attention to how this game handles its rosters, you already know why people are losing their minds. Okay, let's start with Hiyuki, because this one hits a very specific pain point in the game. Glacio has been sitting in a weird spot for a long time. Not weak, but definitely not complete. The last time players really got a premium Glacio main DPS was all the way back in early 2025 with Carlotta. Since then, it was basically felt like the element was waiting for something to tie everything together. And Hiyuki looks like that missing piece. And it is not just because she is Glacio, it is also how she is expected to play. Right now, all signs point to her being built around something called Glacio Shaft. The idea is simple on paper but very interesting in practice. You stack a status effect on enemies, and once you reach a certain threshold, which is expected to be around 10 stacks, the enemy gets frozen. Not slowed, not partially disabled, fully frozen. You basically get a window where the enemy stops existing as a threat and becomes a training dummy. That alone already changes how you approach combat. Instead of just cycling damage as fast as possible, you are now thinking about stack timing, setup windows, and when to commit your burst. It is a more deliberate style compared to just spamming rotations on cooldown. And then there is the possibility of going beyond that limit. There are early indications that the stack cap might not be hard locked at 10. If you can push it higher, you could be looking at stronger debuffs for longer freeze durations. That is where things start getting a little crazy, especially when you factor in characters like Chisa, who can push those stacks even further with her outro skill. So instead of just one mechanic, you are looking at a scaling system where optimization actually matters. The better you set up, the more value you squeeze out of every rotation. And on top of that, Hiyuki being a sword user is quietly a big deal. Swords are one of the most accessible weapon types in the game, and a lot of players already have strong options sitting in their inventory, either from standard pulls or previous banners. That lowers the barrier to entry in a way that makes her immediately more appealing as an investment. And then there is the presentation. Even from early previews, her animation lean heavily into that katana style aesthetic with frost layered into every strike. It is flashy but not in a messy way. Clean cuts, sharp effects, and that kind of visual clarity that makes a character feel satisfying to play even before you start calculating damage numbers. Now, let's talk about Denia because this is where things get interesting on a completely different axis. Denia being a fusion rectifier might sound like a simple addition, but it actually solves a problem that fusion teams have had for a long time. Fusion as an element has always had damage potential, but the execution has been awkward. Rotations tend to drag on, energy can feel inconsistent, and a lot of setups rely on squeezing value out of limited windows. In other words, the ceiling is there, but reaching it has not always been smooth. Denia looks like she is designed to fix that. The biggest thing is her expected interaction with the fusion burst mechanic. Instead of forcing your main DPS to handle everything on field, Denia can apply those stacks from off field. That changes the entire flow of a fusion team. Your main DPS gets to stay on field and do what they are supposed to do, while Denia quietly builds up the conditions for those explosive moments in the background. And when those stacks hit their threshold, you get a detonation, a proper explosion that adds a chunk of damage on top of everything else you are already doing. It is a cleaner, more efficient loop compared to what fusion teams have been working with so far. This also ties into rotation speed. One of the consistent complaints with the fusion comps has been how long it takes to get everything going. If Denia really does provide a better energy flow and faster stacking, then you're looking at tighter rotations and higher uptime. That alone is enough to push an element up in viability. There is also the rectifier angle. It has been a while since players got a high profile 5-star rectifier user. That matters because a lot of strong rectifier weapons have just been sitting with there waiting for the right character to use them effectively. And Denia could be that character that finally justifies those investments. And when you put it all together, you start to see the bigger picture. But there might be another layer to Denia that people are starting to pick up on. Early speculation suggests she could pivot between supporting Fusion Burst and then even interacting with Glacio Shaft, somewhat similar to what Shakona does. And if you pay attention to her design, especially the darker blue tones underneath her hair, it starts to raise a few eyebrows. It is subtle, but it feels intentional and definitely something worth keeping an eye on. Hiyuki is not just a Glacio unit, she is a system builder for an element that needed direction. Denia is not just a fusion support, she is a structural fix for how fusion teams function at a fundamental level. Dropping both of them around the anniversary is not subtle. It is a very direct signal that the developers want to push both Glacio and Fusion into a more competitive position. You can already imagine how this affects team building. Glacio players finally get a proper centerpiece. Fusion players get a smoother, more reliable engine. And everyone else has to start rethinking what the top end of the meta actually looks like. There is also the forward-looking aspect. Characters like Lucilla are already being talked about as potential supports that amplify Hiyuki's stacking mechanics even further. On the fusion side, teams built around units like Amen and Mornier suddenly start looking a lot more complete with Denia in the mix. So this is not just about two characters, it is about what comes after them. If Hiyuki and Denia land the way people expect, version 3.3 is not just another update, it's a shift, the kind that forces players to revisit old assumptions and start experimenting again. And honestly, that is probably the best outcome. Because a meta that moves is a meta that stays interesting. At this point, the only thing left is to see how close these expectations are to the final kits. But even with what we know right now, it is already clear that Kuro Games is not playing it safe with this anniversary. They are filling gaps, redefining playstyles, and setting up the next phase of the game in one move. And if you have been waiting for Glacier to feel complete or for Fusion to finally click, this is probably the moment you have been holding out for. As always, if this video resonated with you, please leave a like and subscribe, ring that bell for massive gacha luck and maybe a sandwich. Thank you so much for watching, maraming salamat po, and I will see you in my next video drop. Goodbye.